All right, Jabosai, good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Meir and Rachel Gold, for dedicating all the shurim this month in memory of Yonah, Tzvi, Ben Chaim, Elazar, HaKohen, zchus, and to thank Noam and Leah Efron for dedicating the shiurim and drashos this month in honor of and in celebration of the 98th birthday of Noam's grandfather, Yosef Hershel ben Mordechai Halevi. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah will be benched with many years of Gesund and Nachos. And the day of learning today is dedicated by the Kehillah as a zchus for refuah sheleima for Selma Woolf. Selma, is, those of you who have been in the shul for a while know that Selma is a pillar of the community. She's having surgery this morning, actually as we speak at Hopkins, and Emir Hashem, she should just have a complete and enduring refuah. We dedicate our learning today as a zchus for Sarah Bas Itte Devora, and hope that she will have a refuah together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. And also with that, let us begin. Last daf of Meseches Be'ashachianu, V'kiyimanu, V'hegianu Lazman Azeinu. The excitement about the end of a new Masechta. Just to be very clear, the excitement of sometimes certain Masechtas, the excitement is, let's be honest, it's over. It's over, right? But that's not the real excitement of a Masechta. The real excitement of a Masechta is that I'm so eager to see what's next. Right? I can't wait to see, what else, what other adventures. I think I've seen everything already. And then again, in Meretz Hashem, like I said yesterday, we thought Rosh Hashanah is over, but in fact, Rosh Hashanah is just beginning in Meretz Hashem tomorrow morning. That's the excitement. It should never be chas v'shalom mistaken for an excitement of, I'm so happy to be done. Chas v'shalom. It's an excitement to finish one thing so that I have the ability and the opportunity to be able to move on to something else. So I will say with that, Mishnah, bottom of Lamed Tes Amud Beis, says the Mishnah, Misha hayu peirosa bi'ira cheres, ve'erevu b'nei osa ir lahavi etzlo me peirosa. So we'll say a very interesting case. Remember, the theme that we have been focusing on is the idea that your produce, it's not just your produce, your stuff has your tchum. Right, your gashmios is an extension of you. So just like your livestock has your tchum, so too again your produce. This is an interesting case. In this situation over here, I have produce in another city. That city is outside of my tchum. So as far as I'm concerned, I was not going to access that produce over the course of Yom Tiv. So let me just check. I was not going to access that produce over the course of Yom Tiv. Good. And then, what happens? Let's say the produce is in City A. The residents of City A then went ahead and decided to do a nice thing. They extended their tchum so that they could bring me the produce. So a very interesting case. The produce is accessible to me not because I made a tchum to make it, or I made an eruv to make it accessible, but because the townspeople made it accessible or extended their tchum to bring it to me. So we'll say, what's the status of the fruit? So the Gemara, the Mishnah says, lo yaviyalo. The halacha is they should not bring it to me. Again, this is not a chiddush. This is in line with everything we've learned because my produce has my tchum. So it's very nice that the townspeople, where the fruit is deposited, made an eruv to be able to bring the fruit to me, but that doesn't change the fact that the fruit itself was limited by my tchum. So just like I could not get to the city in which the fruit is deposited, therefore again, they should not bring it to me, even though for them, technically speaking, it is permissible. So the Gemara says, "Ve'im erufu berosav kamo." But if I made an eruv, whatever works for me works for my fruit. I must say an incredible Musar Haskell as well. That sometimes we think, if you look at the psychology of chait in general, if you look at the psychology of sin, so there's a lot of very interesting pieces that drive sin. Because you know that on an intellectual level, chait never makes sense, right? There's no such thing as an avera that makes sense. If you take a piece of paper, any avera you want to commit, the best, most gishmak avera you could think of, you take a piece of paper, you write one column pros, one column cons. Which one always wins? Okay, there should be a little bit more of a resounding answer to that one. Right? Wow. Okay. Maybe we'll just make a Musar Seder in Meir Session. We'll skip the daf for a little while. But let's say, so again, obviously the cons always win, right? The cons always win because whatever you're going to get from an Aveira is always going to be limited and temporal. That's the reality. The cons could be potentially eternal. So it's not a shaila. So there's a whole discussion. Again, the Baalei Musar grapple with this idea. So if it's so clear intellectually that chait is such a bad idea, so why do we do it? So there's gaiva, there's arrogance, there's taiva, there's desire, there's an innate desire to want to be in control and not be told what to do. There's a whole variety of things. But I think also on a certain level, we also convince ourselves that whatever we do, I'll just do this one thing and all it does is it impacts me. Right? There's no like ripple effect. I have this need I want to satisfy. I have this desire I want to satisfy. I'll take care of it. And it does, there's no ripple effect. Right? We think there's containment of it. And what you begin to see from this halacha is, I will say, just in a simple thing, like every single thing you own is limited by your tchum. Right? So whatever decisions you make on Erev Shabbos, or whatever decisions you make on Erev Yom Tiv, that one little decision impacts every single thing that you own. So if one little decision, like whether or not to go east or west on an Erev Yom Tiv, impacts every single one of your possessions, imagine the other decisions we make in life, the impact they have as well. One little decision, east or west, everything is impacted. To make a decision to sin or not to sin, to do an avera or not to do avera, to make this choice, to make that choice, everything has a ripple effect. And the truth is, every decision we make impacts everything we have and also impacts everyone we are connected to. An incredible yesod in the Koved Rosh, the real thought and significance that we have to bring to bear on all of our decision-making in life. The Gemara goes back to Misha goes back to top of Mem. What's a very interesting case? Misha zimen etzlo archim. Listen to this. Someone invited company over Yom Tiv. Lo yolichu biyadam manos. They should not go ahead and take home leftovers on Yom Tiv. Now, what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi just a moment. Misha zimin etzlo archim meir acheres v'yavo etzlo al yedeir. So we'll say the case over here is like this. I invited company from another city. They're coming to me because they made an eruv tumen. So their eruv enables them to come to me. I should not go ahead. So now we finished lunch. They want to go home. The food was delicious. Do you have any leftovers? They say sure. They want to take the leftovers home back to their city. They can't do that. We'll say again, not a chiddush. They can't do. Why can't they do it? Why can't they do it? Because ultimately it's my food. And because it's my food is limited by my tchum. Unless, of course, if I designated and set aside their portions on Erev Yom Tiv. Right, so let's say again, I have archim coming and I say, this is the archim food, this is the guest food. And I actively designated it, I was literally, well, not more than designated, I was mizakeh. I conveyed ownership to them on Erev Yom Tiv. Rashi points out to Rabbi Silber, if you take a look at Rashi, Manosechem Erev Yom Tiv, Shemasar Malabayis Zelo Adam Achar B'Meshicha, V'amar Lo Zacha B'Manos Halal L'Ploni L'Ploni, Dezachin Lo L'Adam Shelo B'Fanov. V'Hayu Shalmim Ba'oyim Kralim. Listen to this. So if I go ahead and I designate the food that's going to be for the company, and I go to a third party, I said to a third party, acquire this on behalf of my guests, that works. That's called Zachin La'adam Shelo B'Fanov. They essentially become the owners of the food prior to Yom Tiv. If you're the owner of food prior to Yom Tiv, what tchum does that food take on? The owner's tchum. So it turns out that even though I'm going to be serving them the food on Yom Tiv, it was really their food, quote unquote, on Erev Yom Tiv. Therefore, Allah Chalamaysa takes on their tchum. Because it takes on their tchum, if I want to send them back with leftovers, that's totally fine. Beautiful. What's an interesting discussion now? Itmar, hamafkid peros eitzel chavero. Listen to this interesting case. I deposit fruit for safekeeping with my friend. So I have fruit, I have apples, a basket of apples. I deposit my basket of apples with Ruvain to watch it. So we'll say, what's the shaila? What's the shaila? The shaila is, comes Yom Tiv, what tchum, or which tchum, do those apples have? Do the apples have my tchum, the owner's tchum, or the shomer's tchum, the person who's watching it? So Rav Amakragle Mishev Kidlo. So Rav says, no, the fruit takes on the tchum of the person with whom it is deposited. Right? The shomer takes achrayis for it, and therefore halacha lamaisa, the fruit takes on his tchum. Ushmuel Amakragle Hamafkid. Shmuel says, no. Shmuel says, no, it retains the tchum of the owner. So I will say it's interesting. Essentially, what Shmuel says is, we look at title. Who has title? Who has title to the fruit? I have title to the fruit. I know I deposited it with someone else. At the end of the day, however, again, it's mine. Therefore, it retains my tchum. So machlokes Rav and Shmuel. So the Gemara says, Leima Rav Shmuel dazul tamayhu. So let's say that Rav and Shmuel both go according to their reasoning. Watch this nan. Very interesting case. So listen to this case. Look at Rashi. Imhechnes bershus shoro ukederosav uperosav lachatzer chavero. So if I went ahead and I took my shar into the chatzer of my friend with his rishos, bal chatzer chayiv benizakin. Listen to this. So if you go ahead, so let's say I bring my ox to Ruvain's chatzer, and I bring my ox with his rishos. So ultimately, again, if damages occur, Ruvain, the balachotzer, is chayiv. So let's read it again. Emhechnes birshos balachotzer chayiv. Never says going to be machlokes. The Chachamim say, as long as Ruvain gave rishos for that ox to be there, Ruvain is chayiv. Ruvain, the owner of the chotzer, is chayiv for any damages. Rebbe Omer, the olam eino chayiv ad shekabel alav balabayis lishmar. Rebbe says something different. Rebbe says, no. Just because Reuven gave me rishus to bring my ox into his chaser does not mean that Reuven has taken upon himself what? Achrayis for the shor. It just means that Reuven's giving me the right to bring my shor in there. But lamaisa, the only time Reuven takes on achrayis for the shor is when? If Reuven explicitly says, I take achrayis for your shar, for what your shar is doing. Shabbos say fundamental machlokis Rabbi Nechacham. So let's just clarify the case. I'm going over to Reuven's house. Say, Reuven, can I bring my shar into your chatzar? Reuven says yes. Shar damages. The shaila is, what is Reuven's permission? What does that cover? So the Chachamim say Reuven's permission equals achrayis. When Reuven says you could bring the shar in, Reuven says, I'm taking responsibility. So if the ox damages, it's not my responsibility, it's Reuven's responsibility. Rebbe says, no. Responsibility for a shar is only taken by Reuven if Reuven explicitly says so. Now watch this. Rav Huna said, Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, this is going to be very important, halacha kedivrei chachamim. The halacha follows the chachamim. Ushmuel amar halacha kerebi. And Shmuel says that the halacha follows Rabbi. Now watch this. Remember, we have two machloksim over here. Machlokis number one is tchumin. I deposited fruit with Ruvain. So whose tchum does the fruit have? Rav says Ruvain's tchum. Shmuel says my tchum. Now we have another machlokes. Rabbi Nechachamim. I bring my shar into Reuven's chatzar with his permission. Does Reuven take achrayus for the shar? Chachamim say yes. Rebbe says no. Now you have Rav saying the halacha is like the Chacham, which makes sense. I will say why. Because Rav says that halacha lemaisa. Rav says the halacha follows the Chachamim. Because Rav says essentially, when you put something in someone else's domain with their permission, what happens? They take responsibility. Therefore, again, when I deposit my fruit with Ruvain, the fruit's going to take on Ruvain's tchum. When I bring my shar into Ruvain's chatzar, ultimately, again, Reuven is responsible. On the other hand, Shmuel says the halacha follows Rebbe. Right? Shmuel says, when I deposit my fruit with Reuven, that's still my fruit. Retains my tchum. When I bring my shor into Reuven's chatzar, it's still my responsibility unless Reuven explicitly accepts responsibility for it. Selma Rav D'Amar Kirabanon, Ushmuel D'Amar Kirebi. Bepashtos Rav holds like the Rabbanon, and Shmuel holds like Rebbe. To which the Gemara says, maybe not. Amar Lacha Rav. So Rav would say, even by Tchumen, normally I say that what? When you deposit fruit with someone, that the fruit takes on the Tchum of the person with whom you deposited it. But ultimately, again, by the case of the ox, I could even hold like Rebbe. So says the Gemara, Ad kan lo kam Rebbe Hasam, ela de bistama lo kabil alei nitirusa. Because Rebbe only said in this particular case, in a stam case, the owner of the chatzar does not accept responsibility for the shar. Aval hacha, but over here, meaning in the case of Tchumen, hakabil alei nitirusa. But Pashto say the case that we're referring to in our Mishnah over here, or in the Beitzah, is I'm depositing fruit with Ruvain. What's the chap when you deposit fruit from someone? I will say, what is the shomer taking achrayus for? What is taking achrayus for? The fruit. So I will say, so all Rav is saying over here is, the cases are not really similar, right? One is talking about, by definition, the act of depositing something with someone means they're taking achrayus for it. As opposed to the case of bringing your shar into someone's chaser, that does not automatically mean that halacha l'maisa, that person is taking achrayus for damages. Shmuel will say, Anav da amri afilu l'Rabbanon. Shmuel would say, I even hold according to the Rabbanon. How so? Ad kan lo kami Rabbanon hasam ela dinei chalele inish dineikum turei birshusei debal chotzer. We'll say, listen to this. This is fascinating. Shmuel says, Elei to Rabbanon. Why? We'll say, when I bring everyone knows, when you bring your shar to your friend's house, what's in your best interest? What's in your best interest? That your friend takes responsibility, right? In your best interest, because the shar knocks into something, the shar hits something, the shar damages something. It's in your best interest that your friend takes responsibility of the shar. However, di mazik leilo mechayiv aval hocha minecha leinish deleikum peirei b'shusa dechavre. But over here, in the case of tchumin, is it in my best interest that my fruit take on the tchum of the shomer? No, not necessarily, because as we've seen before, that could potentially limit my ability to access my fruit on Yom Tov itself. So Tanan, so we'll say, so therefore again, as much as the Gemara wanted to line up these two machloksim, essentially the Gemara has proven that they're not necessarily in alignment. So therefore we're back to square one. I deposited fruit with Ruvain on Erev Yom Tov. The shaila now becomes, what tchum do we associate with, what tchum do we assign to that fruit? So again, Rav will say, ultimately it takes on the tchum of the shomer, and Shmuel will say it retains the tchum of the owner. So it says the Gemara, let's analyze a bit more. So Tanan, vim erav hu perosav kamahu. Right, we learned in the Mishnah that if you make an erav, your fruit is like you. In other words, your fruit, your possessions, your fruit has the same tchum as you do. V'i amrit keragle mishev kido etzlo. Ki aref hu, ki erev hu, my havi. Now, I'll say, interestingly enough, the Mishnah seems to make, just an across-the-board statement that when you make an erev, when you make an erev, your fruit has your erev. Now, again, that seems to apply in all cases, which should seem to say that even in a case where you deposited the fruit with someone else, that fruit should retain the owner's erev. To which the Gemara says, so my havi. I'm sorry, Keso Ma'aki my havi. Amrav Huna Amri Beirav Kigon Sheyichid Lo Keren Zabis. We'll say first wide line. What's the case over here? We'll say what's the case? It could be that we're dealing with a case where the shomer set aside a corner of his home for me to deposit my fruit. Now we'll say, what's the chap of depositing of identifying the corner? Look at Rashi. Sheyichid Lo Keren Zabis. The Oshle Beitzah Hilchach Bershas Hamafkidhein Aval Hacha Demashkein Shomer V'Kibal Alav Shmirasan Harehen Karaglo. So I'll say, interestingly enough, the Gemara wants to suggest as follows, that it's quite possible that there are two different kinds of Shmira cases. Right? There's two different cases. There is a case of where I give over fruit to the Shomer. Or I should say to the shomer. Now, when a person becomes a shomer, I will say, what does a shomer have? One word. Shomer has achrayus. In a case where he's a shomer, he has achrayus. Bepashtos, the fruit takes on his tchum, because he is the shomer. In many respects, becomes a quasi owner. There's a different type of shmira. The other type of shmira is, I say to Reuven, can I deposit my fruit with you? And Reuven says, sure. You could just put it in a corner over there. Yichid lo keren zavis is essentially a way of saying, if you want to store your stuff here, you're more than welcome to, but I take what? No achrayus. No achrayus. So essentially what I'm doing is, I'm giving you free space. I'm giving you free storage, but I'm not involved in it. Oh, yichid lo keren zavis, in a case like that, it makes sense to say, whose tchum does the fruit have? Whose tchum? Ultimately, that'll be the owner. Because in that case, the shomer is not assuming any level of quasi-ownership of it. So I will say, so it turns out there's really two different cases of shomer. There's a classic shomer, which is a case with achrayis. So, okay, if the shomer takes achrayis, he becomes the quasi-owner. According to the Gemara over here, the fruit will take on his tchum. But if it's yichel or keren zavis, where the guy is, Reuven is just telling me, sure, put your stuff down over there. You're more than welcome to leave it there as long as you want. But I'm not being metapa with it. I'm not getting involved in it. So halacha l'maisa, then that fruit retains the tchum of its owner. Incredible. Tashma, we'll say first wide line, Misha zimin etzlo archim lo yolich biyada manos ela inkin zachalem manosei me'erev yamtiv. So we'll say, let's go back to the other case of the Mishnah. I'm having company from another city on Yom Tiv, right? They made an Erev Tchumen. That's how they're able to come to me for lunch. We have the Suda. They love the food. They want to take home leftovers. Can they take home leftovers? What does the Mishnah say? Can they take home leftovers? No. Why? Because my food has my tchum. The only way I can get around this is how? Is if halacha l'maisa, I gave over ownership of their portion to them on Erev Yom Tiv. V'i amrit kiragle mishev kido etzlo. So I don't understand. According to what we just said, let's say, even if it's true that I gave over ownership to them on Erev Yom Tiv. So let's play this out. So I'm having over the Schwartz family on Yom Tiv. So I decide, you know what, the Schwartzes, they love my food, they want to take home leftovers. So what do? On Erev Yom Tiv, I call over Reuven. I say, Reuven, acquire this food on behalf of Mishpachas Schwartz. Acquire it on behalf of them. Fantastic. We'll say, what happens the moment after Reuven acquires that? So now who becomes the owner of the food? Right? The Schwartz family. Now we'll say, who's the shomer? I'm the shomer, right? Because remember again, where's the food being deposited? It's in my house. So now, 1 second. So let's say, so how does this work? We just got finished saying that what? If you're a shomer over something and you have achrayas over it, so ultimately again, whose tchum does the food acquire? You are the shomer. So remember, the Mishnah says, I have a great chap. Your company wants it. This is incredible. The company wants to take home leftovers. No problem. Just convey ownership to them on Erev Yom Tiv, and then they can take over their leftovers on Yom Tiv. Really? Now again, remember, even if I go through this whole process, I convey ownership to the Schwartzes through a third party, through Reuven. You have to use a third party, I will say, because remember, in halacha, you can't be the makna and the kona, right? You can't be the person who is conveying ownership and also acquiring it on behalf of someone else. So, I think I mentioned this a little while ago. You know where this comes up? You know, when I make an Erev Tavshilin, so I do it on behalf of the entire shul. But in order to do that, it's also my Erev. So someone else has to be kona it on behalf of the rest of the shul. So I can't be the owner of the Erev and also acquire them. So somebody else has to acquire it on behalf of the, so you have to use a different person for that. So the idea over here, the Gemara says is, even if you go through this whole process, I'm still the shomer. I'm still the shomer of the Schwartz's food. And l'maisa, we just said that what? When someone is a shomer, halacha l'maisa, the food acquires the tchum of the shomer. So we're right back where we started. Such an incredible shayla. Vi amrit kiragle mishef kido etzlo, ki zachala. And if you say that food takes on the tchum of the shomer, ki zachala hemai de acher, my havi. Who cares if I conveyed ownership over to a third party? So it's true. I conveyed titular ownership of the food to the Schwartz family. But l'maisa, legabe tchum, we're right back where we started. Third wide line, Rabbi say. So hachanami, so the Gemara says, hachanami kevan shezach lamay de'acher, kemish. So the Gemara says, I'll give you the answer. Hachanami kevan shezach lamay de'acher, kemish sheyichid lo keren zavis dami. Oh, very interesting. To which the Gemara suggests that halacha l'maisa, the act of conveying ownership to the Schwartz family through a third party, is the equivalent of putting the food in a corner. Right? And Abbas, remember again, what did we say before? When halacha l'maisa, yichi lo keren zavis, essentially says, the shomer says, you could put your food here, but I'm not exerting any ownership over it. So the Gemara suggests allowing a third party to acquire the food on behalf of the Schwartz family is the equivalent of putting that food in a corner, identifying a corner, putting the food there, which essentially means when I give over ownership through a third party, I am relinquishing any ownership level over it. And therefore, it's as if it was just deposited in a corner. It fully belongs to the Schwartz family, and therefore it has their tchum. Incredible. The other possibility is zacha shiny. We'll say this is also a little bit different. In other words, if I'm going out of my way on Erev Yom Tiv to convey ownership of an object to someone else, it is clear that I'm being masalik, I'm removing myself from that object in totality, including my tchum relationship with that object. Look at Rashi. It's almost right across. Rashi Zachashayni, Sharei Kol Asmo Lo Asa Elalo Tzia Mishvisaso. The whole reason I'm doing this is to remove my tchum relationship with this item. Ulamido Bishvisa Shalom Birshusan. So essentially, answer number one is that the act of conveying ownership through a third party is the equivalent of placing the item in a corner. Answer number two, which seems to speak a bit more to the mechanics of this, is if I'm going out of my way to convey ownership to the Schwartz family on Erev Yom Tiv through a third party, Ein hochacha gidola mizo, there is no greater legal statement that I'm withdrawing my ownership, withdrawing my tchum relationship than that. Good. So it says Gemara, Rav Chana bar Chaniloi was an interesting case. This is so beautiful. Rav Chana bar Chaniloi tala bisra be'ivra didasha. Rav Chana bar Chaniloi hung a piece of meat on his doorway. Right? That's Erev Yom Tov, right? A big slab of meat hanging from your doorway. Right? So now you'll see why the story is important. The background to the story is as follows. Rav Chana bar Chaniloi was in a different city. Erev Yom Tov, he went to purchase meat. So he's staying at an inn, he's staying by a host. He purchases the meat, he hangs it on the door, by the pivot of the door. His intention is tomorrow to go home. And he's going to take his meat with him, and he's going to go and he's going to have Sudas Yom Tov at home. Okay, so now watch this. So Rav Chana bar Chaniloi tala b'srba ever didasha. So he came before Rav Huna. If you look at Rashi says tala b'srba ever didasha bebeis ushbezichne. He was staying at an inn. He was literally at a host. Shenasnu lo tabchei ha'ir mi ba'od yom v'hu haya ben ir acheres. Shema Arvin lo Lavalakan. It's a very interesting case. But it's also interesting sometimes when you see like how different Yom Tov looked, right? It's so fascinating that Rav Chana bar Chaniloi, Erev Yom Tov, he's going to buy the meat, right? Yom Tov night, he's not at home, right? He's got the meat, he's staying at an inn, the meat is hanging on the door. Yom Tov day, he's going to go daven, he's going to walk home, the meat's on his shoulder, right? It's just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So what happens? He goes to Rav Huna. Remember again, you'll say to yourself, why didn't he just do this before Yom Tiv? What's the answer? There's no refrigeration. And that probably means that there was no shochet in his town. So this might have been the way that people were getting, we have such a different conception about how things work, right? Our challenge is, what time does the butcher close, right? Like what, this is like, if you lived in a city that didn't have access to fresh meat, this is what you would have to do on Yom Tiv. So he's there, so go say, watch this. So therefore, what does he do? Asla kamid Rav Huna. He goes and he asks Rav Huna. So he asks, so it's interesting. He did this already. In other words, the meat's hanging on the door. And he asks Rav Huna, Rebbe, just want to make sure that everything I'm doing is on the up and up, right? Is this all kosher and yasher? So listen to this. Amrle, so Rav Huna said to him, I'at talis zil shakel. If you're the one who hung. If you're the one who hung the meat on the doorstop, you're good to go. On the door pivot. V'inu talu lecha lo tishkol. But if your hosts, if they were the ones who hung up the meat for you, you can't use the meat. You can't take the meat home. So the Gemara says, well, one second, let's analyze this a little bit. V'ihu tala mishakel. Now, one second, is that true? Even if Rav Chana bar Chaniloi, right? Even if he hung up the meat himself, he still shouldn't be able to take it home. Why not? We'll say, watch this. V'ha Rav Huna Talmud Rav Hava, because Rav Huna was a Talmud of Rav. V'amar Rav kiragle mishef kido etzlo. We'll say, what did Rav just say before? When you deposit something with someone, whose tchum does the object take on? What did Rav say? The shomer. Shabbos, remember again, where is Rav Chana bar Chaniloi? He's a guest. Where is he hanging the meat? On the door. Who does the door belong to? His hosts, which essentially means he's depositing the meat with someone else. Well, if he's depositing the meat with someone else, that meat should take on the tchum of the shomer, in which case he should not be able to bring it back home on Yom Tov. But this is also presupposing that his host, right, and have different tchumen, right? If they have same tchumen, that's not a problem. Assuming they have different tchumen. So the Gemara says, Shiny Ivra Didasha Dikimishi Ichilo Karen Zavis Dami. No, the door pivot is different. Because hanging meat on a door pivot is like the shomer telling the owner of the object, here I'm giving you a corner. And what did we establish? When the shomer says, I'm giving you a corner, what does that mean? I will say, what does that mean? The shomer is not asserting any level of ownership over it. He's just giving free storage, and therefore his tchum does not impact the object at all. Amar Rav Ravashi, so also listen to this. So Rav Hillel said to Ravashi, Ve'i inhu talule lo shakil. But yet remember, Rav Huna said to Rav Chana bar Chanilai, you could take it home if you hung it on the door pivot, on the door stop, right, on the door, right? But if your hosts, right, if the hosts where you're staying, if they hung it, you can't take it. Why not? So the Gemara says, V'ilu talulei lo shakil va'amar Shmuel shor shel patam harehu karagle kol adam. Yet Rabbi say we learned that what? We learned that halacha lamaisa. Now here's what's interesting, by the way. One important point. Rashi says, who was running this Beis Ushpazichne, right? Who was running this guest house? This was the butcher, right? So we'll say, so this butcher was a good businessman. He must have been selling to the neighboring towns. So he was a butcher, and he ran a little bed and breakfast, right? So a little bed and breakfast on the side, right? So the Maisa, he's staying in the butcher's bed and breakfast. So we'll say, so now watch this. We learned before that what? That halacha l'maisa, if you buy an ox from the patam, what's the patam? The fattener, right? What's the halacha? You buy it on Yom Tiv. Whose tchum does that ox have? Remember? The purchasers, right? Because the patam, the fattener, has in mind that he's going to sell these shvarim, these oxen on Yom Tiv. So we'll say, so why wouldn't that be the same thing over here? If Rav Chana bar Chanilai is buying from the butcher, and the butcher runs the bed and breakfast, and the entire purpose of the butcher is what? To sell the meat. This should be like the ox of the fattener, and therefore who cares who hung up the meat? It doesn't make a difference. This should take on the tchum of Rav Chana bar Chanilai. So let's analyze this. And if they went ahead and hung it up for him, why should he not be able to take it? What did Rabbi Dosa say? That in the situation, remembering we had this a few days ago, that where there's one shepherd in the city, what's the halacha? If you look at Rashi says, that where there's one shepherd in the city, and everyone knows they're going to give their ox to that one shepherd, or their livestock to that one shepherd, that halacha l'maisa, it takes on the tchum of that one shepherd. So I will say, same idea. The Gemara is asking, why wouldn't the meat take on the tchum ultimately again of Rav Chana bar Chanilai? To which the Gemara says, Talule lo shakil. So is this true that if they hung it up for him, he would not be able to take it? Vatnan, we learned habehema va'kelim karagli habaylim. Ultimately, again, behema and kelim are like they have the tchum of their owner. Ela Shabbos. So the point the Gemara is making over here is, I don't understand why it is that Rav Chana bar Chanilai would not be able to take the meat back to his tchum. It does not make any sense. To which Rabbi say, this is an incredible answer. Shani Rav Chana bar Chanilai te gavra rabahu v'tarid b'shmaite. Rabbi say, the answer is, this has nothing to do with tchum. This has nothing to do with tchum. What was the problem? Rabbi said, there's a separate halachic problem called basar shenis aleim mina ayin. Halacha l'maisa, if you have meat, and there are other people around that meat, especially non-Jews around that meat, if you lose track of that meat, you cannot eat it. There's a concern that the kosher meat may have been substituted with non-kosher meat. So what's the problem? I said, this is so beautiful. Rav Chana bar Chanilai was a Gavra Rabba. He was a great man. Rabbi say, what makes a great man? The Tarid B'Shmaisei. What makes a great man is, he was always learning. Rabbi say, Tarid B'Shmaisei, by the way, I want to just point out over here, how do you see from here that Tarid B'Shmaisei doesn't mean he was always learning? What does he mean was always? How do you know Rav Chana bar Chanilai wasn't always learning? How do you know that? he went to get meat. It's not the pshat that he's sitting in the Meir and says, listen, I don't have time, do me a favor. He sends a guy, right? Every Jewish person has a guy, right? Rav Chana bar Chanilai could have had a guy to get it. He went himself. You see from something amazing. Tarid b'shmaite doesn't mean you're always learning. But tarid b'shmaite means your mind is always on learning. See, Rabbi saying, none of us, I'm talking to us, could always be learning, right? We have day jobs. We do a lot of things. The shaila is, what's the focus of your life? What's the focus of your life? Is the focus of my life my career? Is the focus of my life my hobbies? It's Sunday morning, so I'll say it's the focus of my life football, softball, whatever anybody runs to do, right? What's the focus of my life? What's the focus? And I will say that focus speaks volumes about who I am. Focus doesn't mean I'm always doing it, because you have to do other things in life. But the shaila is, in my pyramid of existence, what sits on the top? What sits on the top? And by the way, it's not just the thing that sits on the top that's most important, because the pyramid is, there's one thing on top, but there's two things below that, and there's three things below that. How does your pyramid of life stack up? Rav Chana bar Chanilai was a man who was tarid b'shmaisei. He was just always occupied with learning. And as a result, and therefore what? If you look at Rashi, second wide line, sorry. So also listen to this. Because Rav Chana bar Chanilai was always occupied ultimately again with his learning, so therefore again the Gemara says, and he said like this: if you're the one who hung the meat up, then you made a siman in the meat. And this Rabbi says, as long as there's a siman in a meat, there's no worry of basar shenesalim min ha'ayin. Why? Because if it's been swapped out for something else, then what? You could see that. However, velo mesachta daitcha mina zil shakel the inhu talilucha mischas daitcha velo tishkol. But at the end of the day, if someone else hung it up for you, then what? Then halacha lamaisa, you precious, you didn't make a siman in it, and if you didn't make a siman in it, you have to be concerned with basar shenes alim min ayin. So we'll say, interestingly enough, it comes out that the issue over here, halacha lamaisa, is not one of tchumin, but rather one ultimately of basar shenes alim min ayin. Incredible, Rabbi say. So good. Rabbi say the bottom line, by the way, is always that your produce, your stuff, has your tchum. Now, what I will point out is, interestingly enough, halacha lamaisa, whether or not what happens if you're mafkid peiros by someone, right? Whose tchum does that take on? So the way that the Rambam paskins is as follows. In a regular case of shmira, where I handed over the produce to someone and he's the shomer, because shmira has some level of ownership associated with it, therefore what? Therefore halacha lamaisa, it takes on the tchum of the shomer. However, in a case of yichid lo keren zavis, where the shomer just said, here, put it over there, and offered me storage, free storage, then halacha lamaisa, under that circumstance, it ultimately goes in and retains the tchum of the owner. Beautiful. We'll say last mission of the Masechta. We'll say animals. We're not talking about two different kinds of animals. There are what we call midbarios. Midbarios we'll call free-range animals, but it's more than free-range, because free-range today I think means something very different. Midbarios means animals that would go out to pasture and would not come back. Now, they would come back, of course, at some point. We'll discuss how long they're out for. Versus baisos. Baisos are domestic animals. So what's the halacha? You cannot water and shecht midbarios, but you can water and shecht baisos. We'll discuss why the Mishnah is discussing watering. Really, we're talking about shchita. We'll say, why can't you go out and shecht midbarios on Yom Tov? Why not? Why not? You know this already by now. Why not? They're not muchan. Hilchos muktzah. They're not muchan. Because since they were out, you did not have access to them on Erev Yom Tov. So bepashtos, because you did not have access, therefore what? Therefore, you did not have any level of intention of using them, and therefore halacha l'maaseh they're set aside for non-use. Eloin baisos, what is considered to be domestic? Halonos be'ir. Those are animals that go ahead and sleep inside of the city. Midbarios, halonos be'efer. Midbarios, those are animals ultimately again that sleep in the pasture. Says the Gemara, Lama li lameimar mashkin v'shochtin. So we'll say ultimately again, why do you have to say watering and slaughtering? Right? Really, the ikar over here is what? The ikar over here is slaughtering, right? Is shchita. It's not about going ahead and mashkin, right? It's not about going in and watering the animals. Well, this is very interesting. You're right. It's nothing to do with watering. It's all about slaughtering. So how do you bring up watering? Milsa agav arche kamash malan. The Gemara is just teaching me an interesting side point. What's the interesting side point? Delishki inish behemto v'hadar lishchot. That a person should first water his animal and then shecht. Why? Mishum sircha demishcha. We'll say it makes sense to water your animal before you shecht, because if the animal is better hydrated, then what? The hide comes off easier. Good. So just you'll pocket this, right? You never know when you need this. Tan Rabbanon, Elohim midbarios and baisos. So we'll say another brayso. Let's see the distinction between midbarios and baisos. The Gemara says midbarios, kol shiotze bePesach, v'ra'os ba'afar. These are animals, we'll say, that go out to pasture by Pesach, and they stay in the pasture. V'nichnasos b'revia rishona. And pretty much they stay out in the pasture until the first rains. When are the first rains? After Sukkot. So pretty much they're pretty much out between Pesach and Cheshvan, right about now. Ve'eloim baisos, and ultimately again, these are the domestic animals. Kol shiyotzos v'ros zchus l'tchum, ubaos v'lonos b'socha tchum. They're animals that when they go out to pasture outside of the tchum, but at night they always sleep within the tchum. Rabbi says, no. Elu v'elu baisos. Both say both of these animals. In other words, whether animals, even in other words, what he's really saying is even animals that go out by Pesach and come back by Cheshvan, by the first rains, those are also considered to be domestic animals. Ela elu midbarios. So what are midbarios? Kol sheyotzos v'ra'os ba'afar ve'ein nichnasos liyishuv lo b'mos hachamav lo b'mos hagishamim. Those are animals that essentially go out to pasture and what? Never come back. So in other words, if you want them, you have to go out and find them. You have to track them down. But pretty much once they go out to pasture, they're not coming back into habitation at all. So the Gemara says, interesting. So what Rebbe's saying is, now remember again, what's Talocha by? So we have a machlokes about the definition of midbarios. But the bottom line halacha from midbarios is the same. What's the status of midbarios? Can you shech midbarios on Yom Tiv? No. Why? Because again, since they're pretty much not accessible, we assume they're not mucham. We assume they're not going to be. Essentially, we'll say, just to compare it, midbarios animals are like apples on the tree. Can you pick an apple from the tree on Yom Tiv? No, right? And even if it falls off, can you use it? No. Why? Because at the onset of Yom Tiv, it was set aside for non-use. So midbarios are looked at in the same way. So the Gemara says, now Rebbe just quoted this new definition from Midbarios, to which the Gemara asks, Umi islei l'Rebbe muktzah? Does Rebbe hold of the concept of muktzah? V'haba mini Rabbi Shem bar Rabbi Meir Rebbe, Bezer Shem bar Rabbi asked of Rebbe, both say, get ready for this. Patzilei tamra l'Rabbi Shimon mahu. What's the status of Patzilei Tamra? Both say for the Smichas Chaver Chavra, you're not going to believe this. Look at Rashi. Patzilei Tamra, like second to last line. Tamarim she'ein mispashlos be'ilan li'olam. These are dates. Both say there's a certain sug, a certain type of date that really never fully ripens on the tree. And what happens? V'godrin osam e'ilin. You shake it off the tree. V'osin lahem choslos. And you make choslos for these dates. So both say, what are choslos? Right? They're baskets made out of palm fronds, right? Made out of palm branches. Choslos. Is it a kli? No, it's not a kli at all, right? Not a kli at all. Right? These are choslos, right? Kli kapos, tomorrow, mekotzinos, losochem is bashal. So we'll listen to this. We'll say, well, I'll just take a moment to say tomorrow night, we start the new Smichas Chaver Zman. It is an incredible time many of you will be receiving personal messages from me today, right? And I hate being disappointed. I'm mamish, like, my entire sense of self-esteem hinges on people joining this new chabura. So as I said, please don't let me down, or I'm going to send you the therapy bills. So if you get a message from me today about Smichas Chaver, don't be surprised. So the Gemara says as follows. So Rabbi Shimon bar Rabbi asked of Rabbi, Patzil Tam Rabbi Shimon Mahu, what's the status ultimately again? Can you eat of these dates on Yom Tiv? Amarle ein muktzah Rabbi Shimon. So we'll say the chap of this is these are immature dates. These are immature dates that you take them off the tree. You fashion these baskets made out of palm branches, right? And you let the dates mature to whatever degree they can inside of this basket. So they asked, according to Rabbi Shimon, can you eat these dates on Yom Tiv? Amarle in muktzah Rabbi Shimon. According to Rabbi Shimon, ultimately again there is no muktzah on the days. Ella grogros v'tzimukin bilvad, with the exception ultimately of dried figs and raisins. Now, both sides. What's unique about the case of dried figs and raisins? This is fascinating. Look at Rashi. Ela grogros v'tzimukin shehen mitchila ro'in la'achila v'udacha osam yadayim la'alosan liyavshan v'shuv ein ro'in ad sheyavshu. As well as listen to this. According to Rabbi Shimon, who holds of a more relaxed definition of muktzah, the only situation of muktzah that he agrees to is as follows. Figs and raisins. What do you think about figs and raisins? Yeah, saying that was edible. Now you subject it to a drying process, which during that process it becomes inedible, and it will become edible again at the end of that process. So Rabbi Shimon says that's a case of muktzah. We'll say, why is that a case of muktzah? Because you've done something to actively render it inedible. So when you've done something to be docha, to set it aside for non-use, that's when muktzah sets in. But anything that is technically usable, Rabbi Shimon will say, is not muktzah. To which the Gemara says, Shabbosai, so what we're intrigued by this is as follows. Rebbe seems to hold of muktzah, even though we have, right, because Rebbe is giving us a definition of midbarios, even though Rebbe elsewhere seems to indicate that he doesn't hold the muktzah. So what's going on over here? So maybe you'll say the case of midbarios is like a case of figs and raisins, meaning the fact that you let them out to pasture. Look at Rashi. You let those animals go out on the free range. So because you let them go out, therefore they're like figs and dried figs and raisins. You are mekatzes biyadayim. That's why they're going to be muktzah. The Dvar Rabbi Shimon kamerle v'leilo svirle. Or maybe the other possibility is that no, Rebbe's making his comment in accordance with the position of Rabbi Shimon's view of muktzah. But Rebbe himself does not hold that way. The other possibility is the Divreim Dirabanan Kamerlahu. Maybe Rebbe is addressing his comments to the Rabbanan. And what does he say? Lididi ein muktzah. Rebbe will say, listen, for me, I hold of a very loose view of muktzah. Right? Well, remember again, we said it's not that everybody holds of muktzah. The shaila just is what? How restrictive or how permissive are you? So Rebbe will say, in reality, I hold of a very permissive view of muktzah. Right? But according to you, right, Rabbanan who hold a more restrictive view, Odeli mihas heicha diyotos v'roas b'pesach v'nichnasos b'revi'ah rishon the Beitzah saying. So Rebbe says like this, I hold a very permissive view of muktzah. But you Rabbanan at least agree with me that if you have an animal that goes out by Pesach and will come back cheshvan by the first rains, will you at least agree with me that that's called a domestic animal, not a free-range animal? And therefore what? And therefore you could shech that type of animal on Yom Tov. At least agree with me on that definition of Amrli Rabbanan lo midbariosein. And the Rabbanan say, no, we disagree fundamentally. We disagree with you in muktzah in general, but we also disagree with you about the definition of midbarios. That we hold that midbarios, even an animal that goes out Pesach and will come back cheshvan, first rain, that animal is also called midbarios, a free-range animal. So say, interestingly enough, what comes out of here is as follows, that halacha l'maisa, everyone will agree with the Mishnah on the designations, that you can go ahead and shecht what we'll call a domestic animal, but you can't shecht a free-range animal. What you see come out over here, halacha l'maisa, is a machlokes regarding the definition, ultimately, of the free-range animal. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the Rambam accepts the definition that's brought down in the Beitzah. That ultimately, again, the definition of midbarios is an animal that goes out Pesach and comes back by the first rains. Beitzos, domestic animals, ultimately, again, is any animal that goes out and grazes outside of the tchum, but will always come to sleep inside of the tchum. We'll say this brings us to an end of Maseches Be'ah. I just want to share with you something amazing. The Ben Yehoyada, I'm going to send out the piece a little bit later on. He has a beautiful arichos. He discusses the idea that Chazal always like to make a connection between the beginning of the Masechta and the end of the Masechta. So he goes on a whole arichos over there, which I'll send to you. But he makes a beautiful observation. He says if you take the first letter of the Masechta and the last letter of the Masechta, the first letter of the Masechta was Beis. The last letter of the Masechta is a Nun, is Ben. Is Ben, a son. Ben Yehuda explains so beautifully that the entire essence of learning is Banim Atem Lashem Elokechem. When we learn, we cultivate a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we learn often to understand halachas. We learn often to absorb material, to know how to function in our activities of daily lives as Torah Jews. There is a utilitarian purpose to learning. But there's a beautiful relationship component in learning as well. That when I learn the Torah Kedosha of the Ribono Shel Olam, it reinforces my identity as his ben, as his son. Banim atem Lashem Elokechem. That every single day when I learn the Torah of the Father, I reinforce my relationship to my Father as his son. But I'll end off with one last piece, which is, because based on the Ben Yoyada, that the goal of the end of the Masechta is to tie to the beginning, is to focus a little bit, to spend 1 minute on this. How do we open the Masechta? Beitzah shenolda b'yamtiv. So I saw there's a beautiful idea. There's a sefer on the parsha written by Rav Avram Zuckerman. Rav Avram Zuckerman, Zichron Livracha, was the founder of the Yeshivos Bnei Akiva. I guess I should say Yeshivot Bnei Akiva. You can't say Yeshivos Bnei Akiva, right? Yeshivot Bnei Akiva in Eretz Yisrael. And he incredible Talmud Chacham, and he quotes a piece by Rav Kook. And he says something so beautiful. Rav Kook said, I don't remember where he quoted it from Rav Kook. He said that, Rav Kook said like this, he said, when a chick is in the egg, why does it peck through the shell? Right? At the end of the day, right, it's got its little world in there. Alles git, everything is fine, right? There's nobody bothering him. There's nobody chaperoning him. Why not just stay in the shell? So Rav Kook says because the chick knows deep down that as great as the shell is, what's waiting on the other side of the shell is even better. And that's why the chick, even though it's scary to peck through because the shell is a protective casing, right? The shell shields the chick from so many of the things that the chick doesn't want to have to deal with. There's a lot of craziness in the nest. It's a pretty labored place. It's nice to be in the shell. But deep down, the chick knows that what's waiting for me on the other side of this is so much better than anything I have in here. Cook says that's what drives the chick. So I was thinking, that's really the pshat of the opening phrase in the Mishnah, beginning of the Masechta. We'll tie back to the beginning of the Masechta. Beitzah shenolda. Ultimately, again, if you go ahead and you make yourself into a Beitzah shenolda. So we were always talking about a Beitzah shenolda means the chicken lays the egg. But the truth is, there's another Beitzah shenolda, which is when the chick pecks through the shell. When you decide in life to peck through your shell, when you decide in life to go ahead and push yourself for more, when you decide that what I have around me is not enough, but I've got to push myself higher for more. You know what that's called? That's called a yomtiv. That's called a yomtiv. That's called a good day. That's called a beautiful day. That's called a celebratory day. Beitzah shenolda, when you decide to peck through your shell and to become more, that's yomtiv, says the Mishnah. That's the din that the Mishnah is teaching us. That's the first din. When you decide to learn and become a ben, when you decide to learn and foster your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when you decide to become a Beitzah shenolda, that's yomtiv. And I say this because we're going to begin in a new Masechta tomorrow. And it's very important that when we begin a new Masechta, I have to do more this next Masechta. So actually I'll bring them out. We have notebooks for Rosh Hashanah. If you haven't been taking notes, take a notebook, take notes. Add something on to this next limud. In other words, it's not enough to go to a new Masechta. What am I going to do more now for Rosh Hashanah that ultimately I didn't do for Be'ah? What is it? If I didn't take notes, I'm going to take notes. Maybe I didn't chazer. Okay, so I'm going to spend 10 minutes a night, chazing, whatever it is. And by the way, maybe it's not Daf Yomi. Maybe it's that, it's a brand new year, it's gracious. Maybe I haven't been doing Shtayim Mikra. I haven't been doing the Parasha, Chumash and Rashi. Right? I'm going to start doing that now. Or, all kidding aside, I haven't been doing Smichas Chaver, Nuchabur tomorrow. Whenever you finish something, you start something new, it can't be like a linear progression. Okay, I go from Be'ah to Rosh Hashanah. But it's the same thing. It's the same. It's just new Masech, the same thing. No. Whenever there's something new, there's hischadshus. Whenever there's something new, it means it's time for more. If I'm finishing Maseches Be'ah, you're not finished if you're not a Beitzah Shenolda, right? Remember again, I only finish the Masechta if I'm Mekayim the first Mishnah. And the kiyum of the first Mishnah is Beitzah Shenolda. Only if I birth myself, only if I get out of my shell, only if I move myself forward, then and only then am I considered to have been Mesayim Meseches Be'ah. So I will say, a Mazel Tov on the Masechta. For those who are going to be at the Siyum tonight, we look forward to seeing you. If you have not yet made your reservations, I hope Yonah Kaplan is not listening because he'll kill me. Right? But there's still time, I think, to make reservations in Meir Tzashem. I don't know if you're going to get food, but there's still time to make reservations. I'm just kidding. There'll be plenty of food. If you haven't made your reservations, please, it's going to be a beautiful Simchas HaTorah. And in Meir Tzashem tomorrow morning, we begin Meseches Rosh Hashanah, B'Sha'a Tova, Mitzlachos, Mazel Tov.